But my gut feeling is, if you look at all the electoral democracies, those who get elected after an election, their approval rating fall immediately within 6 months to below 50, 40, 30%. I call it a perpetual cycle of elect and regret. So why is that? I mean, you guys better fix it before you try to sell it to us.
大家好，欢迎来到本期视频。今天我们来聊一个宏大却有关乎每个人命运的话题：西方式的自由民主，真的是放之四海而皆准的普世价值吗？在雅典民主论坛上，来自上海的风险投资人、政治学者李世默，在一场汇集了美国前高官和法学学者的激烈辩论中，给出了一个振聋发聩的逆向思考。作为一名习惯用历史战绩说话的投资人，李世默直接解构了西方的自我迷信。他指出，以一人一票为核心的现代选举民主历史极其短暂。若从美国1965年通过投票权法案保障全面投票权算起，这种制度至今还不到100年，甚至比中国历史上很多短命的朝代还要短。在人类漫长的几千年文明史中，没有这种民主，人类同样创造了璀璨的艺术、音乐和伟大的文明。反观雅典民主的源头，当年的结果也并不理想。李世默提醒我们，面对一个还没经历过足够长历史周期检验，未能证明其能长期保障人类美好生活的制度时，过度自信是危险的。而中国在独特的制度下，创造了人类历史上最大规模的减贫奇迹。今天我们就来一起深入剖析李世默在这场顶级辩论中的核心观点，看看西方式民主究竟面临着怎样的现实困境。让我们直接进入正片。
Eric, you have prospered as a capitalist, but you have at the same time argued eloquently in many articles I've read and in conversations we've had that Western democratic system, which we in the West usually see as a prerequisite for a free market, is the wrong system for China. Your point, as I understand it, is that for the Chinese, the best system is for the market and civil society to be subservient to a strong ruling party. Does this not inevitably lead, as it did in the Soviet Union and perhaps in certain parts of China's modern history, to a dictatorship?
Thanks. Well, I'm a venture capitalist. I'm not a political person. And as a venture capitalist, whenever I see a situation or I analyze a situation, I look at track record. An entrepreneur comes to me, I look at his track record. A company comes to me for investment, I look at his track record. I think one thing we should be aware of is we're in Athens. Democracy has had a very short track record. It survived here for, by the most liberal count, maybe 200 years at the most, probably much less. Then we lived for a couple of thousand years, during which democracy was a dirty word. Nobody wanted it. And during that period, of course, we created marvelous civilizations. Great music, great art, great culture. We marvel at them in concert halls and museums. I think human civilization did very well without democracy. In Greece, actually didn't work out too well. Then, of course, with the onset of Enlightenment, democratic ideas came back. But as we define it, as Western countries, the version of democracy they're selling to the rest of the world has had an extraordinarily short track record. It probably began, if you define democracy as one person, one vote, it probably began in America in 1965 with the Voting Rights Act, or 66, I don't remember. So it's not even 100 years. So altogether, they're probably shorter than China's shorter dynasties. So democracy is a very short track record. And I think we need to be very careful about being overconfident in something that hasn't had a long track record of producing good lives for people. It has succeeded in many aspects. And I think in China, we had a different system. Had a lot of problems, a lot of disasters in the initial period. But in the last 30, 40 years, it hasn't done so badly. China has, under the one-party state, lifted 650 million people out of poverty in the last 30 years. Let me give you some perspective of what that is. I'm sitting here listening to people taking refugees, 50,000 people to Canada, 60,000 to America, whatever it is. Let me give you some perspective. China has been lifting more than that number of people out of poverty every single day, including Saturday and Sunday, in the last 30 years.
I don't know that, Eric, you maybe know more about the situation in China. Actually, I've talked with young people in China. Up to this point, I cannot see that much that kind of urge for democracy. But how about 10 years from now, 20 years from now? What will be the situation? So as a venture capitalist, I think you have to see the future in a way. So how do you see the future?
Well, I want a future that works.
Yeah.
And when I see around the world, democracies are not working. So it's hard for a venture capitalist to be convinced that I want this for the future. So if you want to sell democracy, you better make yours work. Number one. Number two, I want to respectfully disagree with what Paula said. After the Cold War, an enormous number of countries converted their political systems from whatever it was to electoral democracies. I think according to Freedom House, it went from 47 to 180 or some crazy number. If you survey that large number of countries, vast majority have done very, very poorly, especially in the developing world. There's still mired civil disorder, some in war, poverty. Without China, the entire world's poverty reduction has gone backwards. More people are living in poverty, okay, since the end of the Cold War. If you look at China's neighborhood, you mentioned Indonesia. It was very corrupt under Suharto. Afterwards, they did all the right things: elections, independent press, rule of law, the institutions you mentioned, but the country got more corrupt. According to the Australian professor McIntyre, I think his name, did great research on Indonesia. It says we went from one big Suharto to thousands of little Suhartos. Got much worse. The only two places that converted within sort of Confucian culture, Korea and Taiwan, they democratized after they got very rich already. And of those, Korea continues to succeed, but Taiwan deteriorated tremendously in the last 20 years. The high-tech miracle went away, medium income dropping, politics poisoned. Out of the 23 million people living on Taiwan, on the most conservative count, 1.5 million have immigrated to the mainland. And of those immigrated, they are highly educated, highly skilled, and young and productive age. So the educated elites in Taiwan, half of them have gone to the mainland. And if you go to Africa, go to Southeast Asia, the record is not very, very good. And if you look at developed countries, look at America today, nothing can be done. All these reforms that are needed, not being implemented. Look at Britain, look at Europe, everywhere. Immigration reform, healthcare reform, nothing is being done. So if you look at all these countries, I haven't done the research, but somebody should. But my gut feeling is, if you look at all the electoral democracies, those who get elected after an election, their approval rating fall immediately within 6 months to below 50, 40, 30%. I call it a perpetual cycle of elect and regret. So why is that? You guys better fix it before you try to sell it to us.
Do we have questions? Sir Richard.
Inevitably, my question's addressed to Eric. The authoritarian market model is great when the market's doing what you want. When it stops doing what you want, the situation's rather different. And the communist leadership of China, and communism, the word hasn't passed your lips today, has shown itself to be stunningly incompetent over the last 2 or 3 months in dealing with the development of an unfavorable market situation. This is not a political question. This is an economic question to you as a venture capitalist. What next in China?
They're incompetent on many things. Let me put it that way. By and large, they've been very competent. In fact, they have been competent in the past 30 years during market downturns. I lived through many of them. The Asian financial crisis was one of them, 1997, much worse than today's correction. In the early 2000s, the real estate collapses. So they've done well. In this particular instance, there seems many more difficulties. I believe it's because of the larger economy is being restructured, so it brings in a lot of uncertain elements. I think it's too early to call whether they could react well under the circumstances. But judging by past track record, I think they will do reasonably well. We're not sure yet, but I take it there are a lot of difficulties at the moment.
Thanks. I see a question all the way in the back. We have very, very little time, so please do keep it as brief as possible. Can we have a microphone in the very back?
Nazanin Ansari, I'm an Iranian journalist. Regarding imposing democracy, number one, during the 2009 Green Revolution in Iran, it wasn't America trying to impose, but rather it was the Chinese who sent the anti-crowd tanks to keep the demonstrators at bay. And one other point about democracy is that what we haven't mentioned here is that change is inevitable. And for the moment, democracy is the only system where change can take place peacefully. And whether if we want to have change in China, can it take place peacefully? Can change take place peacefully in Iran at the moment? I very much doubt it. But in America, in Britain, in anywhere else in Europe, change can take place peacefully. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That is more of a comment than a question. So I will continue. Margarita?
Thanks very much. Eric, I'm a German entrepreneur and a professor of US foreign policy. If you allow me a comment. I studied the American Constitution. Thomas Paine said, what Athens was in miniature, America will be in, Washington will be in magnitude. If you study the philosophy of the American Constitution and the Founding Fathers, I think the strength was that they knew from the beginning, studying ancient philosophy, and they were reading ancient Greek and they were reading Latin. They realized that the ideal will never be, they would never succeed with the ideal. It would always be an approximation to liberty, an approximation to freedom, an approximation to democracy. And they knew it's a piecemeal engineering process. And I think this is the strength of the West. This is the strength of our values. And this is why America, for 250 years almost, was saved from communism, from fascism, from nationalism. Of course, I mean, we all know the deficiencies, but that is in the system. We know we will never be perfect, and I think this is our strength.
Do you have a comment, or?
Well, I have two comments. First, comment on the lady in the back. Changes can take place peacefully in democracies. I don't know. Iraq, is that became a democracy? Are changes taking place peacefully? If changes could take place peacefully in new democracies, we wouldn't have these refugee problems. That the Westerners went in there with their militaries and instituted new regimes and called them democratic, but look at what's happening now. So I think, I'm not discrediting this. I just think that we ought to be more circumspect and don't be so self-confident. Second, yes, correct. I think the American founders of the American Republic were very, very wise men, as you quoted Adams in your paper, on your pages yesterday, as saying that democracy is not the same thing as good governance. Democracy is has the same potential of being corrupt, not work as any other political system. I think his offsprings have totally forgotten that.
I'm afraid that we are really almost out of time. I see a lot of questions, but there are many more panels to go. There was a gentleman there I had promised to give the last question to.
Hi, Tawfiq Rahim, based in the UAE. very quickly, just first on track record, I don't know any venture capitalists who invest in 2015 based on market dynamics in 1515, but we can talk about that on an aside. But I agree with a lot of the points you made, and I wanted to ask to the panelists based on something Paula said. You talked about rights, we talked about different elements of a democracy. Do you think we need to change the conversation from democracy to more of a discussion of inclusion, rights, and governance? Because it seems that the focus on democracy is leading to a moralistic kind of claim to a system where it's really the principles of that system that we may seek to implement. And on the Middle East, if you take a look at it, it's those principles that are important, and actually the word democracy is a very dirty word in that part of the world. Thank you.
Well, that's a perfect opportunity for you to give a closing word.
Well, I think I'm, together with Eric, we are descendants of Deng Xiaoping, that we believe in black cat, white cat, that what it works is that it can catch a mouse. But the difference of us is that what is that mouse? That at some point of time, that mouse may mean food. But then another point of time, that mouse may mean something more than that. It may mean dignity. It may mean the right to participate in the process. I don't know when the Chinese people will see that mouse as merely food or the dignity we're talking about. But from my argument, this is a human nature that the time will come.
Paula.
I would say that democracy is the best guarantor of human rights, and so it goes hand in hand. And I also think that, as you very eloquently stated, and the questioner before, democracy is flexible, it's evolutionary, as I said right at the very beginning, in a very precise statement. It's not the democratic evolution is not a linear process. There is flexibility for change, and that is an aspect that I think is the most advantageous and one of its biggest assets, in addition to government being accountable to people. That's what undergirds it.
Well, let me finish by saying something about rights. I think it's much more complex than the way it's being presented here. Let me give you one example. Freedom of speech, that's a right. However, that right, I believe, today seems to be producing a lot of problems in America. Is the right to speak. The right to speak is, if I have legitimately earned money, can I spend that to buy TV commercials to support political candidates? Can I spend that to support political initiatives? American Supreme Court says, yes, that is your unalienable right to freedom of speech. I actually think it leads to money in politics. So rights are not that simple. It's a complicated issue. We got to step back and think about it instead of taking it in as a faith.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed this a lot. I hope you all have.
听完李世默的这些论述，不知道大家有什么感受？在这场辩论中，他不仅指出了西方制度的现实短板，更一针见血地总结了现代选举政治的一大怪圈，他称之为选举与反悔的永恒循环。想想看，现在很多西方政客在选举前承诺一切，可一旦获胜，支持率往往在短短的6个月内就跌破 50%甚至 30%， 随后便是政策的停滞与内耗，比如美欧在移民、医疗改革等议题上的长期瘫痪。李世默直言，在试图把这种制度都授给别人之前，最好先把他自己身上的毛病修一修。这种困境根源在于西方将民主固化为了一种普世且永恒的迷信。李世默犀利地指出，当你坚定地认为自己拥有的就是最好的东西时，就丧失了自我改良的动力。正如美国的言论自由演变成可以用资本购买政治广告，左右大选的金钱政治一样，盲目的信仰往往掩盖了复杂的制度危机。相比之下，中国用30多年让 6.5 亿人摆脱贫困，证明了治理的多样性。如果扣除中国，过去几十年全球的减贫甚至是倒退的。当西方在为难民配额吵得不可开交时，中国每天都在默默改变着普通人的命运。正如李世默所说，中国不会强加自己的模式，中国人对未来也应保持开放，但西方必须放下傲慢，不要动辄对其他道路预设道德批判。 制度的价值不应体现在口号，而应看它能否真正保障人民的福祉。你赞同李世默的观点吗？欢迎在评论区留下你的思考，我们下期再见。